Likkut Beis Ois Yud Aleph. The Frierdiker Rebbe is bringing Yudtes Kislev by night, Tafresh Tzad Gimel, and the Frierdiker Rebbe is going to describe the Maimer that the Alter Rebbe repeated the year after his liberation, Yudtes Kislev Tav Kuf Samach, and traces it back to the initial Maimer that was said actually the Chanukah a little bit after his liberation, almost a year earlier, and it's unique in the fact that it describes the tremendous Maila of taking in and absorbing the Torah and Chassidus in an intellectual, settled way, as opposed to just emotionally getting ecstatic and leaving and letting the emotions ride, called by Chassidim hispailos. And the Frierdiker Rebbe points out, you should know, this is unique. It was a Hirah Shah, it was set for that specific time because Chassidim were so overwhelmed with emotion that they were taking the Avodah and the Haskalah in a very interesting direction. So the Alter Rebbe settled them down with this Maimer. And this is going to open a fascinating discussion about the difference between Chassidus, the Alter Rebbe said before Peterburg to after Peterburg, which is well known the difference between them. But the Frierdiker Rebbe is mamish going to expand on it and have actually a dialogue at the Farbrengen over the next couple of oisias. So the Frierdiker Rebbe says the following: Via says Mekubal, as we have received that B'Chag HaGula Yudtes Kislev Tavkuf Samach, a year after his liberation, which was Tavkuf Nun Tes, in Liyazna, there was a tremendous gathering of Anash. And in general, the crowd of Chassidim grew from those that were initially misnagdim and joined Chassidim. And then the Alter Rebbe said a drush that the Dibra Maschal was Baruch Shas Nisim L'Avosenu. Blessed is He Hashem that has done Nisim for our forefathers by Yom Mohem Bizman Hazeh, which is literally talking about Purim and Chanukah, and Bizman Hazeh in our times as well. So the Frierdiker Rebbe brings in parentheses another nusach that's more meduyik. The way the Alter Rebbe expressed himself that first year, after the first year, he said Baruch Shasan. He said at the beginning of the Maimer Bezal Lashon with the following words: Baruch Shasan Nisim L'Avosenu, and he added, in addition to Avosenu by Chanukah and Purim, he added Habal Shem Tov v'Rabbeinu Harav Magid. He did Nisim for them, and then he says B'Yam Mohem Purim Chanukah and Bizman Hazeh in our times, in present times Yudtes Kislev. So now the Frierdiker Rebbe describes that Maimer that he said at the completion of the first year, and he said the Alter Rebbe is Meshabeach. He praises tremendously the service of the Eibishter through moichin, through intellect, and in turn he's mashbel. He belittles and talks down and annuls the avodah of a heart when it's in ecstasy and not contained. And Frierdiker Rebbe says this was just a Hirah Shah. This was limited to that time, specifically that time, because Chassidim stood throughout that entire year with tremendous excitement and tremendous hispailos, ecstasy, so to speak, from the open kindness that the Eibishter did with them and with him, the Alter Rebbe, by saving the Alter Rebbe and saving the entire Torah of Baal Shem Tov. Now this Maimer, Baruch Shas Nisim, says the Frierdiker Rebbe, in truth, is really a continuation to a Maimer the Alter Rebbe started saying on Chafei Kislev, the first day of Chanukah, just mamish a few days after his liberation, almost a year earlier, on the way back. When the Alter Rebbe said it, he was in Vitebsk when he was traveling back from Peterburg towards Liyazna. In a footnote, the Frierdiker Rebbe adds that this Maimer the Alter Rebbe repeated to the Tzemach Tzedek in Tav Kuf Samach Gimel, and we have a hanacha of the way he repeated it to the Tzemach Tzedek, and he says there's many hagayos arukos that Tzemach Tzedek added his own additions from Tav Kuf Ayin Aleph and Tav Kuf Ayin Beis much later, almost a decade later, and at that point in that Maimer, the way the Tzemach Tzedek rewrote it, there's 15 big chapters with kitzurim, summaries, and it's more than 9 boigin, which is 9 big folios in medium-sized writing. But he says you should know that Beikare, initially, the way he received it from the Alter Rebbe, it wasn't such a long Maimer, it was like 5 amudim. But the Ikir is these are the first Mamarim after Peterburg, which leads us into the discussion as we're going to see. The Frierdiker Rebbe says, I've already recounted the story. It's written in Ksav Yad from the Frierdiker Rebbe Zayed, from the Rebbe Marash, why the Alter Rebbe said these Mamarim. But over there it's written, says the Frierdiker Rebbe, very short, and therefore could come mistakes, so and mixing things up. Therefore over here I'm going to clarify and spell it out. The Maimer that was said Chafei Kislev, that we mentioned in Vitebsk on the way back from Peterburg, and the Maimer Baruch Shas Nisim that the Alter Rebbe said when a year later, when it was the first celebration of Yudtes Kislev Tav Kuf Samach, is really, we have it from a Ksav Yad Kodesh of the Rebbe Marash. And the story we also have in the Ksav Yad Kodesh of the Rebbe Marash describing the background. And this is what the Rebbe Marash describes as the background of this Maimer. I heard from Amur, from his father, the Mittler Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek, that my grandfather, the Alter Rebbe, said this drush. He was his intention was to come and to eliminate some of the spilus halev, the arousal of the heart that was overflowing and bubbling over, and into tnuas chitzonius, outward and external expressions of emotions and the like, which is not the derech of Chabad. He said they would go to the field across the city and daven with gishrein, with screams, because they let their, so to speak, expression of their heart loose. And therefore he said this special drush of Baruch Shas Nisim, he raised the Chabad, the Moichin, Chacham ben Adas, and even excitement, but specifically of the mind over the heart. And really this was a Rasha that was needed at that time, end quote. This is all the Rebbe Rashab describing what he heard from his father, the Tzemach Tzedek, about this Maimer said by the Alter Rebbe. Now, till here is the Lashon of the Rishima that's relevant here, because there's really more things that are Nageya in Havana and Hadracha, in that Rishima of the Rebbe Marash. But for when my father, the Rebbe Rashab, was in Yechidus by his father, the Rebbe Marash, he explained to him the background, I guess, and continued to explain that the spilus was so great by those Chassidim throughout that year after the liberation that they were, so to speak, figuratively, it seems like, hanging between Shemayim va'aretz. They were off the ground and they were just flying. It wasn't even, it seems like, not Shemayim either, because they weren't Kefia Kavana of the Avodah of Chabad. And the Rebbe, with these Ma'amarim, he brought them in a settled oifen. And now the Frierdiker Rebbe launches in the next Ois Yud Beis into the general understanding of Mamarim after Peterburg. The Peterburg and Mamarim that he said in Peterburg were a whole new thing, says the Frierdiker Rebbe. Even though it's not similar to before, and definitely not similar to before then, like a long time earlier, because Bechlal in general, from time to time, the Alter Rebbe changed the way he developed and revealed the Torah of Chassidus. However, when it's explained extensively about this in different places before Peterburg, as explained earlier, he says, however, before Peterburg and after Peterburg, it's such a leap. It's a tremendous difference and separated different. And he says, the fact was that at the beginning of Tavkuf Samach Zayin, there was a very severe question that involved in it was the Alter Rebbe and the brother of the Alter Rebbe, the Maril. And Chak Azmur, the Tzemach Tzedek, this was because he, so to speak, forgo over his midas, over what he should have done, which was an Inyan Prati. Basically, the Frierdiker Rebbe brings in a footnote, there was an Inyan Prati that was connected, it was between the Tzemach Tzedek and his wife, the Rebbetzin Chaim Mushka, which is the Frierdiker Rebbe's other Rabbi. And she went and took his ksavim. If I remember correctly, it was Derech Mitzvah Secha that the Tzemach Tzedek wrote at a very young age, bar mitzvah, and he kept it near him. She was excited about it, and she saw that he was treasuring it, so she wanted to show off, so to speak, to her Zayda, and showed it to the Alter Rebbe. And if I remember correctly, the Alter Rebbe wanted to make a bracha shachiyanu b'shem malchus and called in his brother, the Maril. When the Tzemach Tzedek heard about this, being that this was without his consent, he was very disturbed, and it came between him and his wife, and the Alter Rebbe got involved in the Shalom Bayis to settle it. And because the Tzemach Tzedek accepted, despite him, so to speak, having a real claim, that he was Zoicha, going back inside, that the Alter Rebbe made a kviyas to learn with him Nigla the Torah, and Chassidus. And he learned with him the Ksavim and Torahs that the Alter Rebbe had from the Baal Shem Tov, the Mezritcher Magid, and specifically, the Alter Rebbe chazed with him the Torahs and Mamarim that he had said in public and in private when the Tzemach Tzedek was still young, very young, and he used this lashon. The Alter Rebbe said to him, I'm going to repeat for you those Torahs and those drushim that you have heard in Neshama and not in Havana. Meaning in Neshama, I guess when he was very young, but not with Havana. And in a star on the bottom footnote, the Frierdiker Rebbe adds, Kedua Maisa, that in Tavkuf Tzadik, Chag HaShavuos Tavkuf Tzadik with Rabbi Isaac Hamler, that in the time that the Tzemach Tzedek said a Maimer, his first Maimer, Al Shlosh Dvar Ma'olam Oimed, that he heard from the Alter Rebbe, Tavkuf Nun Gimel, Tavkuf Nun Dalet, which was way earlier. This is what he heard afterwards from what he what was said when he was very young. Okay, and he says the majority, the Friedrich Rebbe says, the majority of the Mamarim that the Alter Rebbe repeated to him as a payment, so to speak, for the fact that he forgone his rights or his anger or his being disturbed. These were largely the Mamarim that were said before Peterburg. Now, moving on to Ois Yud Gimel. I think what the Friedrich Rebbe has pointed out with Ois Yud Beis is that these Mamarim that were said before Peterburg were repeated by the Alter Rebbe to the Tzemach Tzedek, so they were transmitted also afterwards. Ois Yud Gimel. Now somebody from the crowd started analyzing the difference between the Mamarim before Peterburg and after Peterburg. So someone asked, Shal Echad, one person asked, L'chura, the difference between before Peterburg to after Peterburg was, initially it was just Gilu, or the Alter Rebbe was shearing, so to speak, sparks of light, revealing light, and afterwards he began the inyan of Haskalah, of understanding it and accepting it and settling it intellectually. He said this obviously based on the understanding from the Friedrich Rebbe of the Kavanah of that Maimer. Friedrich Rebbe took to this and was very against. He said, no, this is the wrong understanding. He responded, Be'ejiv, was haste? What does it mean it started Haskalah after Peterburg? Lefi zeh, that would mean, haistach, that as oir on Haskalah is eine Beis Inyanim. That oir, which is how that person referred to the drusha before Peterburg, and Haskalah, which he referred to afterward, are two different Inyanim. As free is given as man for oir beforehand, there was a time for oir. As man for Haskalah, afterwards began the time for Haskalah. V'hainu, says the Friedrich Rebbe, it's as if you're saying that this is the limit of oir, and from here and onward is the, so to speak, the domain of Haskalah. This is not the truth, and chas v'shalom to say this about the light and the seichel of Chassidus. The seichel of Chassidus is a godly seichel, hence it's also referred to as light. The truth is that Haskalah doesn't have oir. That means the light of Chassidus is not Haskalah. And this is the Chamoskal Rishon. This is self-understood. He says even more than that. Now, even something that's called oir, if it cannot be received and digested in Seichel, it's not the inyan of oir of Tikkun. It's maybe a oir of Toyu Vavoyu. So the kids are oir and Haskalah are one and the same. And now he's going to define. They're not totally the same, but they go hand in hand. It's like a body to a soul. So like the oir and Haskalah is kechada inon. They're like one. They work together like guf and nefesh, like a body and a soul. Other tifer, he says even in a deeper realm, it's the inyan of naran and chayi yechida. Nefesh of neshama, which is lower levels of the neshama, and chayi yechida, the higher levels. Zeh haklal. Oir without Haskalah is not oir, as we mentioned, and Haskalah without oir is not Haskalah. Did I say it correctly? Oir without Haskalah is not oir. Now, after it's meir, the Haskalah, when the Haskalah is clear by a person that's working his way upward, so a maskal al davar be'emes, if he he grasps it intellectually through avodah of tefillah, he afterwards embodies also the oir. So he understands the gufa inyan, that's called Haskalah. Adver pnimius, the naran of the inyan, he has the lower level of the neshama of the inyan, and this is the nefesh, das heißt their oir. So the neshama, other tifer, the chay yechid of the inyan. After that, in there, the depth of it really is the chay yechid, which is the oir. So they work together either as a body and a soul, or even in the neshama itself, as the lower level of the neshama and the tifkeit of the neshama. And now the Friedrich Rebbe, he sidelines what we refer to today as Haskalah, and he says, "Narvas itzeruf min Haskalah." What now people refer to as intellectualizing and Haskalah, philosophizing, is das masva. It's like the veil that Moshe Rabbeinu placed between him and the people that they had to have in order to separate them. And the Friedrich Rebbe, I'm just going to say this in advance, Friedrich Rebbe is going to point out there is the effect that the masva is meant to have, and what the masva accomplishes, as we'll soon see. And then there is the way people can mistakenly take their learning due to the fact that there is a masva. So it says the Friedrich Rebbe, the way people refer to Haskalah today, that's the masva, that's the veil in a negative sense. By Moshe Rabbeinu, it says, Hini karan or panav, the skin of his face shone, and they were afraid, they feared to come close to get near him. Aval Moshe himself didn't know about this, that his face shone, because Vagila or Elyon that shined upon Moshe Rabbeinu was before and after, at the beginning and the end, the same, were equal. That means that before Moshe Rabbeinu knew about it, that his skin was shining, and after Moshe Rabbeinu knew that there has been this revelation, they're the same. However, through the masva, there became a difference between the time that he spoke to the Eibishter and or the Yidden in Torah that was without this veil, this covering, and the time that he spoke to them through this veil. So by Moshe Rabbeinu there was no difference, and be'emes they were kelim also to speak to Moshe Rabbeinu in Torah without the masva. So what is the accomplishment of the masva? I'm going to say it first outside. Is that the masva revealed to Moshe Rabbeinu made him conscious of the fact and cognizant of the fact that they need a lower level, and therefore when he transmitted Torah to them, even without the masva, it was in a way that they were able to receive. And as we're going to see later, the Frierdiker Rebbe is going to describe the same thing as about the Alter Rebbe. What was accomplished through Peterburg was, so to speak, this masva, that the Alter Rebbe explained the Torah in a way that was able to be accepted and digested, so to speak, in the midas of people. The Chassidus is a whole new level. So hina idea masva, through this masva, he knew that his skin was shown, and the skin of his face was shining, and this is he says that you should know that the veil itself is what we refer to today as haskala. It's all of a sudden seichel. They look at it differently. And you should know, because this gives place for, and it's the root of a yenika, for a negative sense, the way people, so to speak, derive and take this masva, and hence also in the haskala, they all of a sudden consider themselves philosophers of Chassidus and intellectuals, but not taking it as Torah is meant to be, and as Moshe Rabbeinu was giving it due to the masva. And he says in parentheses, those that learn Chassidus and do not toil and do not invest in the service of the heart, in Bir Avodas Halev, in Bir Hamidus, and Hanaga, that's Al Pi Chassidus. Haskala and Oir are, in their case, Haskala and Oir can be seen as two different things, and the Frierdiker Rebbe concludes this part of the conversation. It's a heartsveitig, it's a hurts the heart. Just today is Yom Tov, and we have to talk in Yom of Einig. So till now the Frierdiker Rebbe, Ois Yudalit. Till now the Frierdiker Rebbe told us that Oir and Haskala work together, mamash, so closely, they're inseparable. And if you're learning Chassidus properly, the Haskala, that is the Naran that embodies within it the Oir and the Chai Yechida of Chassidus. And he said the fact that people can look at Haskala as its own, as having life on its own, regardless of the avodah shabbat, taking in the Oir of Primus HaTorah, that's due to a masva. And this masva, this veil, separation that Moshe Rabbeinu wore, is, as we're going to see, has a tremendous positive effect. That's what caused the Mamarim after Peterburg to be different, and the same too in regards to Moshe Rabbeinu. The Torah that he transmitted, even though when he was teaching Torah he took off the masva, but the Torah was a different Torah. However, this masva itself, the fact that there is a veil, gives a unika that someone can make that mistake that person made by the Farbringen and said that Aaron and Haskala are two different things. So, Yudalit. In Mehus V'Atzos from Rebbe, he says you should know in the essence of the Rebbe, before Peterburg and after Peterburg were completely equal. Obviously, Peterburg had an effect on the Rebbe in a powerful way. It was mamshach, a tremendous elevation. And what type of elevation, says the Frierdiker Rebbe? It's like the elevation that is impressed upon a neshama, that when it comes into this world, to be enclosed within a physical body. And on one hand, it's a golos v'shivya, it's an exile, and it's like a captivity for the neshama. But being that the neshama is fulfilling the kavanah al-yona, the supernal intent the Eibishter had with bichlal lowering down the neshama into this body, so it's a tremendous elevation. And in its essence, and this for sure, the Alter Rebbe had this lift, so to speak, and this is and in this detail, for sure, the Rebbe after Peterburg had this a whole new level. But in the way he revealed himself towards others, which means Lagabi the Talmidim and Chassidim before Peterburg and after Peterburg, the Alter Rebbe gave of himself equally, and he says just like Moshe Rabbeinu before he needed the masva, and after he needed the masva, he was giving of himself equally. As we know, even after he had the masva, he took it off when he taught. And as he's going to explain, the essence is a gam der masva al pnei Moshe is given shalei zun mekarnei ahoid shalei bizman limudei b'Torah. It's true that the intent of the veil that Moshe Rabbeinu wore was that in time that they're not learning from him Torah, they should not enjoy, so to speak, the ray of shine from his face. But when they went, because when they came to speak to him, when they came to speak to with the Eibishter, he took off the masva malpanav, and same too in the time that he was learning with Aaron, his sons, and with the Yidden Kimborin, the Friedrich Rebbe quotes, as explained in Eruvin, brought in Rashi and Chumash, that was without this veil. If so they had the time that they were able to see his face. What was the effect of the masva? So he says the inyane is known. Al derech hamavur binyan tzimtzum, the internal, so to speak, constriction a teacher goes through before he expresses and analyzes and explains to his Talmud. He's analyzing first internally. So he says the mashlam hashpa of Rav Talmud really takes place by him, the tzimtzum, him within his own mind first constricting the thought that he wants to share. And same too in this regard. The etzem etzius of the masva, the existence of this veil, and knowing that Moshe Rabbeinu knew that he needs this masva, this is the difference between Peterburg and after Peterburg. His internal understanding that they need a different type of hashpah, and that inner process. So now comes another person suggested, or asked, if so, someone by the Farbrengen asked the Friedrich Rebbe, the fact that initially Moshe Rabbeinu did not know that his face shone, so l'chura, this is itself a maila, this is itself a tremendous benefit, because he sheared in a different way. And Bechlal, the Friedrich Rebbe is going to point out, no, the maila is towards himself, the fact that he didn't see himself, so to speak, in that way. But the Friedrich Rebbe says that's only a maila by a prat, by a person that's a regular between people. So yeah, he's perceiving himself in a humble way. But by a nasi, by Moshe Rabbeinu, that his whole inyan is his shavit, his flock. So that's not necessarily in his role as a nasi. It's not a ma'ila. Says the Friedrich Rebbe inside. The Friedrich Rebbe responded, for sure that not having this personal feel of this elevation, recognizing his essence, is a tremendous quality, and it's a bittul of tikkun with the tremendous bittul of toyu. It's the bittul of tikkun and the ma'ila. It's ma'ila over bittul of toyu. That in Toyu, there's also in Toyu, which is the unorganized worlds, there's also a tremendous high level of bittul. But that bittul is seen by others. The other person notices how he's batal, and therefore the other person, even if he's batal to others or he's batal, they won't blend because the other one sees this bittul. Hagam, even though he himself doesn't feel his metzias as a metzias, just the fact that he is a atzmi, he's an essence-like person or being, and being that in essence he's bottled to this level of toyu, is bottled to Eirin Soif with a tremendous via atzmi kan zayin bottled, the way a essence-like being is bottled to its source. So he's bottled, but the toik of a bittul is seen and felt as an existence. It's not a real bittul, and klapi all those surrounding. And this is the mile of a bittul of tikkun, where he's bittul b'metzis, he's taken, not felt. He reaches a level that he's so bittul, or the Moshe Rabbeinu didn't feel this bittul, even klape others. They felt he's blending in because he's taken, not such a metzis kilu. So lefizeh, says the Friedrich Rebbe, the Inyan Mavur, we can understand that Moshe Rabbeinu before he needed the masva, and the Rebbe before Peterburg, that they didn't know that their face shone. That's for sure. That's a maila of bittul, and the emes is true as that they were so bottle, and to the extent that the others didn't feel that separation that they did, that came about through the masva. However, this is only, but every maila and ilui, every quality and elevation is when there's a change there, it turns into chisaron. Either he didn't have it till then, or now he noticed it. So he says this, and therefore this whole thing only exists by common folk, by a ish prati, a person that has his own avodah. So it becomes a shini of the maila. He didn't know before. Now he knows, so it's a chisaron. He noticed the bittul, or he noticed now he needs a masva. But because the tamadava is the shini comes from a sibah prati, something caused it change. But by Moshe Rabbeinu and Alter Rebbe, that neshamas the atzilus and the general neshamas parnasei Yisrael. So the farvas. That means that when the question or the explanation of why this change is a general one. It's based on what's needed for everybody, for the whole Klal Yisrael, and therefore it's not a chisaron or a maila within them. So the Friedrich Rebbe settled this haste. For why there was a shinoi is not a question in their own personality or in their own avodah. So the Friedrich Rebbe settled, so to speak, this side question that the person asked, is it a mila, the fact that they didn't know, or there was a mila and then afterwards it's lacking that mila because then they found out that there is a separation and they're much higher. And the Friedrich Rebbe, a drop will continue this discussion in Ois Tezvav.